morning. It is 11 o'clock, and we will be calling this first meeting of the Delta Conveyance Finance Authority, calling it to order. My name is Valerie Pryor. I'm the General Manager of the Alameda County Flood Control and Water Conservation District Zone 7. I will be briefly running this meeting until we have an election of officers. The Delta Conveyance Finance Authority was established for the limited purpose of financing the California water fix. We do have hard copies of the meeting materials here at the director's seats and also at the other end of the room. I understand the room is a little small. It is difficult to get meeting rooms here in Sacramento, but rest assured for future meetings we will obtain a larger room. So sorry for that inconvenience. So, Ms. Stanley, will you please conduct the roll call?
Board Member Pryor?
Here.
Board Member Davis?
Here.
Board Member Kremen?
Here.
Board Member Sethi?
Here.
Board Member Record?
Here.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is public comment. Members of the public may address the authority on matters that are within our jurisdiction. If any member would like to address the board at this time, please fill out a speaker card and hand it to Ms. Stanley. Please note that you have 3 minutes to address the board on any matters within the authority's jurisdiction, including those on the agenda. So right now I have 1 card, which I'm going to call. If anybody else would like to speak, again, fill out a card and you can provide it to Ms. Stanley. So with that, I'd like to call Barbara, Perry, and Korea to speak, and you can join us at the table.
This morning, thank you for the opportunity to speak. What I want to share with you this morning is people in this room are aware of the fact that the climate change modeling for California water fix has only been completed through 2030. You are considering moving forward with WIFIA loans that you would not have to begin repaying until 5 years after the project is completed. You won't know then how much water you're getting. We already have ruling for phase 1 of the water quality plan update for the Delta. We've already seen the framework for phase 2. You are gambling billions of dollars moving forward without having extended modeling done. And I will leave it at that. Thank you.
Since we are a new board, I'd like to allow each member the opportunity to introduce themselves and provide a short background. So we can start with Director Record, and we can just work our way down.
Thank you. My name is Randy Record. I'm from San Jacinto, California, which is in Riverside County. My family's been there for well over 100 years, involved in agriculture. I represent the Eastern Municipal Water District. I have for 17 years. I'm their representative to the Metropolitan Board. I've been on the Metropolitan Board for 15 years and I'm currently chairman. The term of chairman ends this year. I was president of Aqua for a couple of years, a few years ago, which I'm very proud of, and really broadened my horizon and contacts, issue acknowledgement around the state. And so that I'm pleased to have the opportunity to serve in this very important role on this very important J.P.A. Look forward to working with everybody else.
My name is Paul Sethi. I am a member director of Alameda County Water District since 2010, and I've chaired our finance committee since 2011, gone through 2 large bond offerings during that period of time. I've spent my career in Silicon Valley in high technology, coming up the product management ladder. I've held some fairly senior positions like at Xerox and Hewlett-Packard, where I had profit and loss responsibility for fairly substantial revenue lines. And I think I bring a lot of good knowledge to this committee in terms of my finance background. I will provide a full bio here on the table for information for anybody else. But what I think is more important that I'd like to mention, not on my bio, is that I grew up with this water district. My father was a draftsman working in the engineering department beginning in the early 1960s. I literally grew up with the water district, attended board meetings already when I was a child, went on many field trips. I was at Oroville Dam with my father and other engineers in 1968 as an 8-year-old, watching the completion of Oroville Dam. And ACWD was the very first of the state water contractors to make a commitment financially to building Oroville and the State Water Project in 1962. And we had a very nice signing ceremony across the lawn here with Governor Pat Brown. So I think I bring a heritage and history of the water industry from our community to this new responsibility.
As I mentioned earlier, I'm Valerie Pryor, General Manager for the Alameda County Flood Control and Water Conservation District Zone 7. I've actually only worked there for 3 months, but previously I spent 15 years working for the Cascade Lake Water Agency, which is another state water contractor. I served as the CFO there and have significant work experience in bond finance and other public financial matters.
Jeff Davis, I'm the General Manager of the San Antonio Pass Water Agency in Beaumont, California. I've been in that position for 13 years. I've been in the water industry in Southern California for considerably longer than that. My background is as an engineer, not as a finance person. My agency is a very enthusiastic supporter of Cal Water Fix, one of the biggest beneficiaries in that project.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Gary Kremen. I'm from Santa Clara Valley Water District. I represent the north part of Santa Clara County, such places as Palo Alto, Mountain View. Such companies as Google, Netflix, LinkedIn are within my district. Before that, I was a board member and president of Pearson Hills Water District, which is the water retailer for the town of Los Altos Hills. I'm both a finance person with the Stanford MBA and degrees in electrical engineering, degree in computer science. Like Paul, been in Silicon Valley, started a couple of companies, Clean Power Finance, raised $2 billion in debt, tax equity and equity, Pace Avenue, doing property assessments for clean energy. And before that, I started Match.com, where I'm indirectly responsible for 2 million babies.
Okay, thank you for the introductions, and with that, we'll move on to election of board officers. So at this time, I will entertain motions for the election of a board president.
I'd like to nominate Mr. Record as board president.
A second?
I'll second.
Okay, shall we vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? None. With that, Mr. Record is our board president, and I will very happily pass the gavel.
It looks like it's been well used.
I need about a 30-minute break now to collect my thoughts. Thank you. Thank you for the vote. I want to very much live up to the expectation and provide some leadership and great collaboration here. At this time, I will entertain motions for the election of a board vice president.
I'll make a motion to nominate Gary Kremen.
All second?
Any discussion? Gary, is that a position you'd like to serve as? Or?
Sure.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Now we will take motions for the election of board secretary.
Too much responsibility.
Jeff, I would like to nominate you for up to the job. Is there a second? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Item 5C is adopt resolution 18-1 designating regular meeting time and place. And what we have is quarterly meetings. I would suggest that we set meetings a little closer than that. Doesn't mean we have to meet every time. For me, I hope to be able to attend the other J.P.A. meetings, and I would suggest that perhaps we schedule our meetings for the same day. As I said, if for some reason we don't need a meeting on a particular date that comes up, we can not have one. That would be my thoughts.
So Randy, are you recommending monthly as opposed to quarterly?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to agree with that. We got a lot of things to do. We got a lot of money to raise. We have a lot of ground to cover. So being on the same day makes sense to me. So we can attend those meetings because we work together with the other folks.
Any other thoughts?
I'm supportive of that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Aye. Resolution passes. We have no consent calendar items. 7A, adopt resolution 18-2, adopting a secret determination for actions related to California water fix that the board has reviewed and considered the BDCP California water fix environmental documentation and adopts the lead agency's findings of fact, statement of overriding considerations, mitigation monitoring, and reporting program.
I would like to move approval of resolution 18-2 as presented in the agenda package.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. 7B, authorize execution of professional service agreement with Michael Bell Consulting Incorporated for a not-to-exceed amount of $75,000 to retain the services of Brian Thomas as Interim Executive Director and authorize member contributions for payment of invoices for said services to be allocated equally among members. Before we take this item, I need to let the board know that J.P.A. know that in an abundance of caution, I'm going to recuse myself from this discussion. I didn't mention in my introduction, but I do own a vineyard in Paso Robles and have a small wine business. And Mr. Thomas has done some business with us in the last year or so. Turn it over to...
You can tell I'm a wine club member. It's fun.
all yours.
Okay.
We've got the gavel shuffle today.
Okay, thank you, Chair Record. We're going to go on to item B. Thank you for the disclosure on conflict of interest. Authorize the execution of professional service agreement with Michael Bell Consulting, Inc. for a not-to-exceed amount of $75,000 to retain service of Brian Thomas as interim executive director and authorize member contributions for payments of invoices for said services to be allocated among members. Any discussions or comments?
Gary, I think Brian is well known to many of us. He's done a lot of work in the water industry. I would like to give him an opportunity to say a few words and also just ask if there's anything magic about the $75,000. Based on your understanding, do you think that's a reasonable number to get us through the year, or do you think it should be a different number?
Oh, I would like more. Well, thanks, Jeff. Just brief background. So I've spent over 30 years in the public power and water business. Started my career in the city of Anaheim Public Utilities Department. I worked in the city of Riverside. I worked for Metropolitan Water District for a total of 17 years, serving as the CFO there and assistant general manager for about 10 and a half. I left Met and was a managing director, a partner with the largest municipal advisory firm in the country, Public Financial Management. Did that for about 7 years, and then currently actually serving as the Chief Financial Officer for the Las Vegas Valley Water District and the Southern Nevada Water Authority. So I've been involved in the water business for a long time. I've participated as an issuer. I would say that one person can make a difference. I participated or advised on well over $7 billion worth of debt, and so generations will suffer the work that we've done paying that back. Almost all that debt has been in California and Nevada as an advisor in Nevada and a CFO there. I've been involved in this project, my time at Med. I remember meetings starting in 2006, 2007 as the CFO, so it's truly an honor and pleasure to have the opportunity to work with you. To the $75,000, I think that's fine. We were looking at this because it is an interim appointment. The level of effort may be a little bit more than that if we're meeting monthly and we're moving things along. But what I would suggest is, to the extent it looks like that's not going to be enough, I'd come back and talk to you about what the appropriate budget would be.
So the agreement does say you need to let us know when you hit 60,000, so we presumably have enough time if we needed to increase that. The only question I have, Ryan, is obviously your financial capabilities are well known. Some of the work here is going to be more grinded out, administrative type work, filing documents, I guess, saying we're J.P.A. with the program. You feel comfortable with that?
Yeah. One of the things that PFM has done as a firm is actually provided those services for a very similar agency, a conduit agency. And I'm lucky because I have very capable lawyers who are going to be assisting. Linda will be assisting at very understanding those requirements, what needs to be filed, so I'm going to talk about it. Yeah, absolutely.
With that, Mr. Acting Chair, with no further discussion, I would make the motion, staff recommendation, to authorize the professional services agreement for $75,000.
Okay, any second?
I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion? Call for the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, let's bring in the good chair knows what he's doing.
Thank you.
Welcome aboard.
C, authorize the Executive Director to negotiate and execute a services agreement with the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California to provide treasury, controller, and accounting services in an amount not to exceed $30,000.
Just briefly, Mr. Chair, similar to the design construction, Met is going to provide services to keep our books, keep the money, help set up bank accounts, all that sort of stuff. They'll keep that, all our activities separate, of course. Staff, I'm really familiar with a lot of the staff in Metropolitan is going to be doing. So this is a very cost-effective way to get these things done.
And again, are you pretty comfortable with the 30,000?
Yeah, I think
For now.
Yeah, for now. And again, a lot's going to depend. We'll be talking with them as we start to do more work. If we get approval to move forward with the application with WIFIA, if we issue that, there's obviously going to be a lot more activity.
I'll make the motion.
I'd like to make a comment first, if I may. So, one of the things I'm concerned about here, and would just like to throw out for thought, having worked on major initiatives with Wall Street, is on the financing side, they like to see an arm's length with Treasury Controller or finance operations, especially on a board like this where we have substantial interest on the part of one of the board vendors there. And so I would just throw out that maybe over the long term we should develop a strategy where we have an independent treasurer controller separate from one of the participants in the program.
Yeah, just my own experience. I started my career working with the Southern California Public Power Authority, another similar agency that issued debt on behalf of its members to finance the power plant and transmission line. And they essentially started, just as we're suggesting here, their largest participant by far was the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, and their staff provided those services just like we're suggesting here. It was segregated, but yeah, I think we look as we move forward to see if it makes sense to establish a separate arm of the agency to do that.
Any other discussion?
Now I'll make the motion.
Okay. Do you have a second?
I'll second.
And I agree with your comments that's something that needs to be high on the list. We're talking about treasurer and controller or auditor. If there's no other discussion, I'll call for the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. 7D, Report on Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act, known as WIFIA program, and authorize the Executive Director to take actions to develop and submit a letter of interest to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency for assistance under the WIFIA program to assist in financing the California water fix.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and let's see if I can actually make this work.
I like that part of the presentation.
The other idea. There we go. Where's that thing? There. There you go. So what I propose to do is take a few minutes, just talk about WIFIA in general. I think the just sort of up front, the WIFIA letter of interest is literally that. It's a letter of interest that describes the project, talks about our interest, is the very first step. No commitments, by the way, on our part at this point. And as I'll describe, there's a competitive process that we're going to end up going through. So, talk about what WIFIA is, eligibility requirements, summary of the loan terms, which are very flexible, very favorable, which is why we're interested in this, and then just the process and timeline, as I mentioned. So, WIFIA was passed as part of WRDA back in 2014, as Chairman President Record said, Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act, and it was modeled after a similar program in the transportation field called TIFIA. The program itself, the staff who administers the program, who determines who gets the money, is all out of the Environmental Protection Agency. It's a leveraged program, so the Congress appropriates a certain amount of money. In this case, in federal fiscal year 2018, it was $55 million. The $55 million is really to cover losses. So in case they make a loan and somebody doesn't pay it back. But that's not their limitation. That $55 million, depending on the credit quality, and they're really looking at good credits, can leverage up to about $5.5 billion of loan capacity, which is the round that we're looking at today. They've done one round of funding already. This is the second round, and they're really focused on aging infrastructure and conveyance and water quality.
Sorry.
And that went off my list. Thank you. Better come back. So in terms of eligibility, the program was designed to have a pretty wide span of borrowers. So everything from public agencies like ourselves, tribal entities, corporations, joint ventures. So if you're thinking of public-private partnerships as a way of delivering water infrastructure, these would qualify. And SRF programs and those kinds of project borrowers also qualify. The projects themselves, for all but small communities, and a small community is defined as 25,000 or less, the minimum project size, project cost would be $20 million. They're really looking to incentivize large, regionally and nationally important projects, similar to water fix, regional significance, seawater and brackish water desalination, SRF projects, as I mentioned, projects that would enhance energy efficiency, reduce the amount of energy used in the water cycle, that is to pump water, treat wastewater. Those kinds of innovative projects also are things they look at. And then drought prevention, mitigation are other types of projects.
Hey, Brian, I would assume that we as a Joint Powers Authority would fit under the category of public agencies.
Correct, yeah. And a regional public agency. So another good thing in terms of the project itself. The three basic criteria, and sort of the general criteria, are project impact. So what kind of impact is this going to have on the state, on the region, and in national significance, it could be things like how we actually do the project, the way we both process and technology improvements that could have applications elsewhere are things that they're looking at.
So innovation would be a
Correct, absolutely. It's part of the act, it's part of what they're trying to spur on and to award.
So new tunneling methods.
Correct,
things like that.
correct, exactly. And this project, logistics, trying to figure out how we're going to move things around. I can think of lots of different ways to do it. Technology in terms of once the project is complete, in terms of earthquake monitoring and preparedness. You can think of all kinds of things that people hadn't done 20 years ago that we could be doing here that really will help in the application. Readiness to proceed and technical feasibility is the second one. So they don't want to say, okay, we're going to give you a loan for $500 million, $1 billion, $2 billion, and have to wait for 2 years, 3 years for you to start putting it to work. So is the project ready to proceed? You all are very familiar with all the work that's been done to get us to this point. And then the last one, a very important one, is creditworthiness. The program dollars go further if you have high credit quality behind it to pay it back. So if you look at the makeup of all of the agencies here, we have a pretty high credit. We also have DWR as a participant here, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later, and I think that's worth a longer discussion. But we think creditworthiness, getting the agreements together, making sure we understand what each of the commitments are as we move forward is going to be important. But the creditworthiness of the participants is another plus for the project.
So Brian, as far as readiness to proceed, obviously we have a secret document that's certified. A number of other permits we do not have yet, but we're obviously working hard. We get dinged for that, do you think?
Potentially, yeah. As I said, this is only the second round of funding. I talked with a couple of the WIFIA staff. That's something that they'll look at. We disclose the permits that we received, the permits yet to come. And
This is the way I read it, this is a lengthy process, and we may very well have those permits by the end of the process.
yeah, that's our plan, would be to at least have good prospects of that. The other thing I would note is that, and we've seen this happen, we'd like to get to the next step with this letter of interest, and by the time we get through the application, we definitely have the permits.
Are there any restrictions that might tie us in the future to taking the funding?
Yes, great. And I do have a slide on, but you have to meet all the federal requirements for a loan. And I've got a list of them we can talk about just after this, but absolutely, it's like any other federal sponsored program. The loan terms themselves, it's the longest dated maturity would be up to 35 years after this completion of the project. One of the nice things about the program is it's like the SRF program. You don't have to make payments until you're done with the project. The interest rate is based on Treasury rates. What they actually look at are the state and local government series, which has the same maturity or same average weighted life as the average weighted life of the loan, and that's how you set the interest rate. Another good thing about it, the interest rate that you're going to pay on the loan is set at the time of financial close. So if you're going to be doing this over 3 years, it's a drawdown reimbursement loan. But if we settled up a year from now, interest rate was 3.5% or 3.8% or 4%, whatever it would be, that's good for the next 2 or 3 years, even though you're not drawing down the whole loan. So that's a nice thing. Interest rates certainly is helpful. The other thing that they've talked about, and it would depend as we get in the application stage, to the extent that the agencies who are going to be paying this loan back
and all of the participants wish to what we call sculpt the loan, that is push out so that you have rising payments over time or have very low payments for 5 years and then level that out. You have the ability to move principal payments around, if you will, to meet your cash flow needs. Another positive structural issue. The last couple of things, you can pay off the loan anytime, no prepayment penalties. In today's world, you all know, with traditional 10-year par calls and the elimination of advanced refunding, this gives you flexibility that you don't have with a traditional 10-year par tax-exempt loan. Then the other thing, WIFIA will only fund less than half, 49% of eligible project costs. Eligible project costs are most of the costs that we've incurred. There's a few of the planning costs, early on costs that may not be eligible, but 49% of our total project costs are eligible. And when we talk about total project costs, we'd be looking at not just project costs in 2018 dollars, but the escalated costs over time. So that 16.7 billion really is going to be more as escalation occurs. So we'd be looking at half, just under half for that amount. And to your point, Crown, the other requirements, all of the federal laws, Davis-Bacon, got to meet all the environmental regulations. Do that, of course. American Iron and Steel, all of those regulations for any other type of federal grant or loan that you get are also associated with this loan. The other interesting thing is that they've made a big deal about this. It's got to be a common revenue pledge. So the revenues that are going to pay for the 51% of debt and the 49%, they're the same revenue stream, and they want to see a common revenue pledge. In our case, it would be the installment purchase agreements that each of the participants would execute, and I think that will definitely meet their requirement. The other interesting thing that I didn't put up here is WIFIA has offered, it's kind of sleeves off the vest in my mind, but they've offered to subordinate their loan to the senior debt or parity debt of the agency. So when you're calculating your debt service coverage ratios on your senior debt, you could exclude the WIFIA loan. If for some reason we can't pay it back, we go into bankruptcy or whatever, the terms of that loan then step up to be on parity. So when it really counts, it's a parity loan. Like I said, it's kind of sleeves on a vest. Off a vest. The other things that, as we go through the application process, they're going to look at rate covenants to make sure, just like we do with any of our revenue bonds, whether it's a 110 coverage or 125 coverage, there will be a rate covenant to maintain revenue sufficient to pay them back. The process itself, the reason we're here today is the letter of interest is due on July 31, so at the end of this month. We've been working, that is a collection of members and contractors, have been working on this letter of interest for some time. It's still in draft. We believe we'll meet all of the needed changes in time to file this, which will ultimately be it's a 50-page limit, but with exhibits, it's going to be a lot of material. So our intention is to file it by about 27th or 28th to make sure we don't miss the deadline. And as I said, it's a letter of interest. There's no cost. There's no application fee to file the letter of interest. The project selection, so the EPA staff who work in the WIFIA program are going to go through all of the letters of interest. They're going to take 3 to 4 months, and then they'll announce funding recipients, if you will. That starts the application process, the real loan application process. When you get there, we'd obviously be talking to. And what happens then is there are fees because they being the EPA, WIFIA staff, they're going to hire lawyers and advisors. We're going to hire lawyers and advisors. We have to pay for, interestingly enough, the WIFIA's lawyers and advisors. So that there's a filing fee of $150,000 and then other costs, which could be as much as $300,000. So when you get to the application stage, particularly if we're looking at, like, we're asking for $1.6 billion, there's, in the six figures type of costs. If we get into that process, we would expect to close the loan anywhere between 6 and 12 months. I put up here a expectation of late summer, fall of 2019. The recommendation is essentially to authorize me to take the necessary actions, work with the other participants who've been working on this, submit the letter of interest. The initial request, I also need to point this out, our request is for $1.6 billion. I told you it's $5.5 billion is what they've got in loan capacity. We have language in there that says, or whatever else you give us, basically. But also, we have language in there saying, this is a very important, large, significant project. It's got a long time horizon. We would also like you to realize that we're interested in 49% of the whole project. Other arrangements like a master contract, other ways we can get this done so that we don't have to file a letter of interest next year to get the next tranche. So we're putting that in there just to see what kind of reaction we get from the WIFIA project. And with that, I'm happy to answer any additional questions.
Questions?
Randy, I represent a number of disadvantaged communities, and so anything that can spread out payments and give those communities more of an opportunity to get a better tax base or whatever is extremely helpful to our constituents. So I see no downside moving forward with something like this. It's really helpful for us.
Gary?
Does validation process have anything to do with this, or is this independent validation?
No, we do have a section talking about the validation process. It certainly is part of the whole credit structure, and all the litigation, you have to list all the litigation that's involved, and because they're going to do an assessment of that in terms of what are the odds that one of these cases is going to slow down the project fundamentally. So it does have some impact, yes.
Okay, well, I'll make a motion to go.
I have a question first of all. Mr. Thomas, are we facing any risks in terms of meeting the deadline on the letter of intent?
Not if you give approval today, no.
Okay. And the second question, although it's not in its complete form, is there any way that us as board directors can get a sense of what the letter of intent looks like at the current stage? I had put in a request to Stephanie Morris about whether we could get an advance look at the draft, just because we are approving this, and I wanted to feel more comfortable about it myself.
Yeah.
But
So whatever she said goes.
she said it wasn't available yet.
Yeah. So certainly, we're turning another draft next week, and if you guys are comfortable, I'm comfortable. There's nothing to hide, frankly.
But at worst, by the time the filing is made, we should be able to get a copy of that. Right?
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah, absolutely.
But I really wanted to make sure that we're not facing any risks about that deadline, because it's within less than 10 days. And I hope we're on track for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions, comments? I have a motion. Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. 7E, authorize Executive Director to prepare and file all necessary documents related to the formation of a Joint Powers Authority and to take other steps necessary and convenient limited to the creation of a public agency and that do not have a monetary obligation that exceeds $5,000.
This just gets to your earlier comment. We've got to do everything to make sure we're meeting all the legal requirements. The 5,000 is not right.
And that's what I was going to ask, at 5,000, does that limit us in any way, or? Okay. If that's the case, if nobody else has any comments, I'll make a motion.
Okay, a motion and a second.
Second.
I would call for the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Reports and announcements. Do you have an executive director report?
I do, if you don't mind, just a couple of comments. First, again, thank you for this opportunity. Like I said, working on this a long time, it'll be fun to see if we can make this happen. I wanted to also say, I keep talking about that conduit issue or the J.P.A. You know, we're formed for a specific purpose, which is to provide a vehicle to make loans and to borrow money on behalf of our members, and in particular in support of this project. I would propose at one of our upcoming meetings that we actually have an agenda item on the credit structure so we can talk about it in more detail, because fundamentally the concept is that DWR is going to issue some debt and the authority is going to buy that debt so that we can pass on costs to all of the member agencies or the contractors appropriately. And it comes back to the validation suit as to why we're doing this. So I'd like to take a little bit more time at upcoming meeting to go through all that, so you guys are very familiar with the credit structure itself and what the different, and there's a ton of agreements that each of the participants are going to see and sign, and that you as a board are going to have to approve as we move forward. And so go through that whole process. But basically, we're a conduit issuer. That is, we're not issuing debt to fund our project, but issuing debt to support the convenience project itself. In terms of the overall timeline, I've told you with regard to WIFIA, we're going to file this. We've got 3 or 4 months where we're going to wait to see what happens. If we get selected, then we are going to be working in earnest on that application. And then we're going to be retaining those needed professional services. We'll be coming back to you with a budget for that. If we don't get selected, then I think the question is, do we move forward issuing our own debt to fundamentally do the same thing? And then we're going to have to also retain the appropriate professionals, and you've all issued debts, so you know how that goes. So we'll be doing that. In addition, there's a bunch of activities because we've now created another governmental agency. Similar to what the Design Construction Authority is doing, we're going to have to retain an auditor, state law. We have to have audited financials, so we've got to retain an auditor. We have to require, as a J.P.A. financing authority, there's certain other annual filings that we have to make. We're going to have to adopt bylaws. The other thing I would suggest is that we should adopt a budget. Even if it's just an administrative budget, you all ought to know how much you're paying for me, how much you're paying to that, how much, and we ought to be able to honor that over time. So I'd be pulling that together as well. I've suggested that we also retain general counsel to represent, to your earlier point, to represent the J.P.A. We've got great service with staff and all the other attorneys who are working on this, but I think it would be a good idea to retain a general counsel. We need, if we're going to issue debt or do a borrowing, the state requires us to have a debt management policy. So I will be drafting one up for your review, and we'll get that approved, obviously, before we do any borrowing. I would also suggest that we put together an investment policy. We're going to have proceeds. We do a borrowing, so we ought to know how we're going to invest those. And it's good practice for a finance authority to have an investment policy.
Sure. Yeah, no, that sounds like good stuff, kind of a combination of ministerial stuff. I would think at the same time, given the amount of money we might want to look at having an independent financial advisor to look at things, look at alternative structures, P3s, other ways of issuing debt, what type of tranches it look like, hear a little bit about what's in the marketplace today for issuances like ourselves, both if validation succeeds and validation fails, alternative structures, etc.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Page 2, I agree. and as a former financial advisor, I couldn't agree more. So, absolutely.
Can't hire yourself.
Unfortunately. You already have hired me. That's good. And then the other thing is, we've done these contracts with Metropolitan, so I'm going to want to meet with Metropolitan Accounting staff, make sure we get that. And then there's just basic procedures, like, so how do I get paid? Let's start there.
Setting up a check.
Right. Yeah, and just approvals, who approves it. As an example. So we're going to work through all of that stuff. That's all we telling you on that. But I'm excited to get this going. Anything else you all think of, obviously, I'm here to serve you. Just in terms of time, you asked time commitment. I still am the CFO in Las Vegas. I've talked to them. I told them that today I was up for this appointment. They are very comfortable with that. We are recruiting for my replacement and have been for a while. But I will still be in Vegas 3 to 4 days a week. But I'm available phone, cell phone, email at your. So that's it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Future agenda items, you mentioned that when you talk about the structure of the J.P.A, there will need to be an auditor. You also mentioned earlier our treasurer, so I want to make sure that that's part of the structure that you're going to put together.
Yeah, we've got treasury management and controller function, and then obviously we have to appoint a treasurer. That could be one of you, it could be a staff member of any of the members as well. And so we just want to do that.
And following up on Gary's suggestion of independent financial guy, I think it's really important that we immediately look at every conceivable option that could be available to us, because we do have things that we're looking at as far as DWR and the WIFIA and all those things. So we want to hit the ground running and make sure that we look at all options that are available to us. Do you want to have any other future agenda items? Yes.
I have one. For a future meeting, it doesn't necessarily have to be at the next meeting, it could be the one after. I would like to have a discussion about, under our governing policy, about the executive committee and perhaps expanding that. In my appointment to this new body, I'm representing our board, and I'd like to express the opinion of that board here comfortably, that we may end up with 24 participants very quickly that are members of this J.P.A, and perhaps we might want to consider expanding that executive board to 4 or 5 members. In the case of Alameda County Water District, we're very interested in working on that committee, that executive committee. We're willing to dedicate time and resources to work with the committee. My board has expressed that it would be nice if there was a little bit of a better balance between Northern and Southern California interests on this J.P.A, especially when we have a lot of future PR efforts to consider in the promotion of financing these twin tunnel programs. And I would just like to remind people, for those that don't have the historical references, that we went through this exercise once before in the late 50s, early 60s, when people were hemming and hawing on coming on board to finance the state water project. It was our water district that became the first of state water contractors, made the commitment. And Likewise, our board has voted twice, 5-0, to support the California water fix. I believe that may be the only unanimous vote in California at this point. We understand the risks as well as the opportunities, and it's also why we step forward when called upon to be one of the three agencies, the largest of the three agencies, to kick off this J.P.A. We put in resources from our law firm in drafting a lot of what is in the J.P.A. agreement and refining it, simplifying it, I might add, compared to the design and construction J.P.A. And so we'd like to make a pitch at a future opportunity if the board were to consider expanding the executive committee to be a real participant in the process.
Okay, certainly happy to discuss that. I'd like to know more about the balance between Northern and Southern California. So we have 3 Northern California representatives here, 2 Southern. Is that you want more from Southern California, or? I certainly understand the PR aspect of it.
I'll put it this way, I'm trying to offer a helping hand to Southern
I
California.
appreciate that very much.
Mr. Chairman, I would also like to point out that the J.P.A. agreement that all of us approved, or we wouldn't be here, does allow for, as the board gets larger, and there will be more members, so there'll be more members on the board, it does allow for the board to vote additional members onto the executive committee. So that's already been thought of in the J.P.A. agreement that we approved. So
Right.
I think that was envisioned at the very beginning.
Gary.
2 things. Our chair and president, we haven't decided what your formal role will be. You mentioned kind of a financial advisor guy. I would hope, and I'm sure you would agree, women are open for that job, and maybe we talk about diversion and inclusion in our hiring process, et cetera, at some time in the future, maybe not now. I know that's probably important to our member agencies. And 2, I just want to ask to maybe see if something is false news that I just read on Twitter. Is it true that you did private work for Randy's winery? Isn't it true you just bought some wine?
It is true that I just bought some wine.
Okay.
I am a member of Randy's Wine Club. I would commend.
Are there other wine clubs? Aren't there hundreds of thousands of wine clubs?
I belong to all of them. My wife and I actually.
Okay. Okay, so that is false news. I just wanted to...
Correct. I am a wine club member.
You didn't do work. You bought some wine.
Correct.
Okay.
Randy knows I don't do work. That's true. Thank you.
Anything else? Well, I think we're off to a good start, and look forward to getting to know each of you better, both personally and as we deal with the issues in front of us. And I'm excited about the opportunity and the prospect of what we can achieve for the state of California. So with that, we are adjourned.